Welcome to Suzanne's studio. I'm Suzanne Barnett, your host, and tonight I am so pleased to introduce our guest, Dr. Fred St.Goar. Dr. St.Goar is brilliant, he's innovative, and he's darling, really. That's all I'm going to say. Welcome, Dr. St.Goar.
I'm honored to be here.
Thank you. Well, I didn't mention a couple of things, but I'd like you to tell about it. That I will say that you are an alumni of Harvard and Stanford. And how did you become an interventional cardiologist?
Good question. Why does someone do what they do?
Yeah.
So cardiology is I find it a very satisfying and fun part of medicine. Cardiologists get to deal with patients in terms of helping them with their lifestyle and living well, but we also get to fix patients too. When there are plumbing problems on the heart, we can actually intervene and make a big difference. So I appreciated that early on, and it really intrigued me, and off I went.
Well, there's so much to talk about, but I think we should talk about the mitral clip, right?
You want to jump right in, don't you?
No. You've practiced for 27 years. Talk about that.
Well, so I've been in the community here at El Camino Hospital for 27 years. Prior to that, I was at Stanford for 9 years, and where I did my training. I moved out here from Boston to finish my medical and then cardiology training and do what's called interventional cardiology, where we actually learned the procedures, and stayed on for a little bit on the faculty there. And then I was recruited to join the El Camino staff, which is an amazing hospital. We are so fortunate here in Mountain View to have such a unique hospital that offers really an incredibly high quality of care. And we can come back and talk about that at some point. But so I've really had the good fortune of spending all of my then professional career working out of this hospital. Hospital was built, in the late 50s, and then we rebuilt it 9 years ago. So it was really fun, the new building too, to be involved in that. So it's really been a privilege and an honor to be able to practice medicine in this community.
And that makes a lot of difference, doesn't it? Psychologically and otherwise.
Well, it's very exciting to be in a supportive community, a community that is, we're spoiled. Obviously, it's very affluent. But what does that mean? That means that patients listen to you when they come to you. They want to come. They want to learn. They want to learn how they can live well, live better. And so the time that I spend with patients often is very fruitful. If I can get the message across about wellness, about lifestyle, about diet, about exercise, and see results, it's really very exciting.
But then when you can fix their heart, how is that?
That's really rewarding, obviously. And that's what, as I said, attracted me to cardiology. And what's interesting, Suzanne, is I have a panel of patients, some of whom had their heart attacks 20, 25 years ago. And I was able to be there right when they had the heart attack, intervene quickly, because that's what El Camino is so well known for. It's really a state-of-the-art medical center for being very effective at dealing with heart attack. It's a heart attack center. And treat the heart attack, stop the heart attack, open the vessels when they're plugged up. They go home, and then they have followed with me ever since. And so these are folks 20, 25 years who, as I say, had their event, then they got the memo. They changed their diet. They started exercising. They got stress out of their life. And they've lived well ever since. So, yes, it's very rewarding, very satisfying to see these patients. Frequently, when they come in to visit me, I'll spend the first minute or two talking about healthcare, and the rest of the time, we can talk about their children and grandchildren and everything else that's fun. So it's a real privilege.
So how did the mitral start?
Mitral clip. So this is, and thank you for having me on this, first of all. I'm honored to be here.
Well, thank you.
I'm honored, just as I say, I'm honored to be in this community. To have something like this in the community is really special. And what makes a community so unusual, and it really is, the mitral clip story really is a great example of that. And that is, we as physicians in this community I'm not singular here. I'm not unique. It attracts individuals who not only think about what the day-to-day care of their patients is, but think about the bigger picture. I mean, how can we solve problems? I mean, physicians by nature tend to be problem solvers, but here it's even higher level. I mean, we're thinking about big problems. I went through my training at Stanford in what would be the late 80s, just when balloon angioplasty was really hitting its stride. Balloon angioplasty is when you go in and open up the vessel with a balloon. And it was first done in the late 70s, so it really was just getting going. And a lot of that innovation happened here in this area. Dr. John Simpson was one of the great early innovators, and he was one of my role models. And so as a group of us were going through training, it was hard not to basically drink the Kool-Aid. And what I mean by that is to think about ways to do better, to do what we were doing, but do it better. And that's what we did with balloon angioplasty and opening the vessels. But actually what really intrigued me, even more than the vessels, were the valves. So the heart is an amazing pump. How many times does your heart pump, by the way, you think, in your life?
I have no idea, but a lot, especially when I interview someone so fabulous.
Well, here's an amazing concept for everyone to think about. So it pumps 100,000 times a day or so. So
is it really that much?
Probably, your heart has pumped probably 2.4 billion times.
Billion.
Billion. Billion.
God,
I mean, the concept of a billion. Sure, some people in this area understand billion. You and I don't understand billion.
No,
but
of course not.
The concept of anything mechanical, anything working a billion times is amazing. And part and parcel in that are the valves that need to open and close to keep the blood moving through the heart in the right direction. Because if the valve doesn't work, what happens? The blood doesn't move through forward. I mean, you pump and it goes backwards. Mm-hmm. And if it's on the right side of the heart, it goes backwards up into the veins. If it's on the left side of the heart, which is the main pumping chamber, the left ventricle, if that valve, what's called the mitral valve, leaks, where did the blood go? It goes back up into the lungs. So that's called mitral regurgitation. The other valve on the left side is the aortic valve. That's between the main pumping chamber and the aorta. That doesn't leak as often as the mitral. That sometimes stiffens up and gets narrow. That's called aortic stenosis. But the mitral intrigued me. It really intrigued me because there's a lot going on. And what makes it so amazing is it's significantly larger than the aortic valve because the pressure of the blood going through into the main pumping chamber is actually very low. And why is it low? Because the blood pressure has to go through the lungs. And the lungs are one of the most fragile organs in the whole body, and the blood pressure in the lungs has to be low. Right? If you have high blood pressure in your lungs, it will burst out, pop in. So the blood pressure through the lungs is actually quite low, and then it has to fill the left ventricle to get out going in a low pressure system. So the valve needs to be pretty big, and it has to be really efficient. It has to be very effective at letting the blood come into the heart. And it's basically two pieces of Kleenex. And it's held together by these little cords that go into what's called the ventricle and the chordae, and that keeps it from puffing up, from prolapsing, whatever. And it's like an amazing symphony. And what do I mean by that is there are a lot of moving parts. There are a lot of different pieces and parts to the mitral valve. And for it to work well, for it to work really efficiently, all the parts have to work in sync. And if the trombone gets out of tune, if the viola isn't being played well, things start to go heck in a handbasket and leaks backwards. So I found that really intriguing. And the frequency of mitral regurgitation is really, it's not insignificant. So you take people over the age of 70, and 10 to 15% at least will have a leaky mitral valve. And what does that mean then? As I said, the blood pressure, the blood goes back in the lungs, and the heart, to get a certain amount of blood out, has to pump more, right? Because some of it's going backwards. So the heart gets tired, the pressure in the lungs go up, and what do people feel? They feel short of breath. Just because of pressure, it's not, they get a little leaky water in their lungs. So it's a really significant problem, and it leads to what's called congestive heart failure. So that intrigued me to make it work, and it's a mechanical problem. And when you have a mechanical problem, there's really only one thing you can do to fix it, right? Medicines don't really work that well. You need a mechanical solution. So what has been historically the mechanical solution? Open heart surgery. Go in and either repair the valve, figure out why it's leaking, and do a little plastic type surgery on it, or in the dramatic situation, you actually replace the valve. Repairing is more physiologic than replacing it, and trimming it up and making it, but it's open heart surgery. And open heart surgery requires heart bypass. You have to stop the heart. You have to put the patient on the heart-lung machine, and basically it's very stressful to the system. Patients are in the hospital for 5 to 7 days, and honestly, I don't know, I'm sure you've known some people, everyone out there probably known someone who's had open heart surgery. It's 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 3 months sometimes before they're really back to steam.
Right.
And the other issue is some patients are just too sick to even consider open heart surgery. Their valve was leaking so much and the heart muscles gotten weak, and that's where the cardiologists came in. We said, now wait a sec. There's got to be a less invasive, less traumatic way to fix that valve. And that was the idea that I had now 20 years ago. And at the time, I was working on some projects where we were delivering medical sutures at the end of a catheter, which was kind of interesting. We were doing it to close up vessels that were open. And I heard of a really interesting, very simple, very elegant repair technique on the mitral valve that was basically pioneered by an Italian surgeon in the early 90s and wasn't used in this country very long because it was almost too simple. Cardiac surgeons didn't like the fact that it dumbed it down, but basically what they did, that where the valve was leaking, the mitral valve, they go and they just would suture it up. If you think of your lips as the 2 leaflets, and where it's leaking, just put in a couple sutures. So a very simple, very elegant procedure. And so I, and more importantly, a whole group of people, I don't want to take too much credit, I planted the little seed, and off that this huge tree grew involving a lot of different people where we came up with a way to do that. And basically, the end of a catheter go in and not deliver a suture, but what the light bulb moment we realized we could actually, what was better was to put a clip in there. A very simple, elegant clip that we could put on the leaflets and see if the valve was still leaking. And we had both ultrasound and X-ray. We did this in the cath lab. And so the patient was just minimally asleep. And we'd put the clip on, and then we got to see where it was, if it worked well. And if we didn't like where it was, we could take it off and move it back and forth. And I said this was all done in the cath lab. And so the patient, was awake half an hour after the procedure, and off they went, and we'd have a pretty good idea right away if it was working or not. So it basically changed the whole paradigm of basically how to manage mitral regurgitation.
Oh, yeah. Drive-by surgery, right?
Drive-by surgery.
You've got to show us.
Well, should we take a look at the animation?
Yes.
Or should we look at the device itself
first? Let's look at the device first.
Okay.
Yeah.
So again, this is done in the cardiac catheterization laboratory. So the patient is flat on the table, and we have the only thing we need to expose is the groins, because we go in through the main vessels in the groins, and that's how we access the heart. We have an ultrasound machine, a tube down the throat, which gives an ultrasound image of the heart, and that's really helped our procedure because that keeps getting better and better, and an X-ray. And so we'll put in a catheter to access the vein, the femoral vein, and then this is what we thread up. And we thread first a tube that basically steers this, and then this is the device itself. Now, this doesn't go in the body. This is what's sitting out. So you can think of it here. It's sitting out here. We have a little stand for it. We introduce it in. And this portion is what basically drives the device, because this device needs to not only be steered, but we need to open and close it, because when it's in the heart, in the what we call the left atrium, we open it up, and we have some little devices here which we call the grippers. These are grippers, which we pull up, and you can see there. And then we'll introduce this, and I'll show you an animation of this because this is a little complicated to describe. But so we'll basically introduce that in, and then we can twist and turn it around and steer it with these different knobs that we have here, because this will steer it. Very complicated here. These are hard to make, by the way. We got a
bet.
bunch of really smart people who came up with it. I take no responsibility. Just a bunch of really smart Stanford engineers came up with this. So then you steer it around.
Yeah.
You find out where you want to go.
Yeah.
And again, I'll show this in the image. Introduce it through the leaflets and then pull back up and put it on kind of like a clothespin. And then we close it. And if we like where we are, we'll drop it off and leave it there. And if one isn't enough, we can put 2 in.
And they stay permanently?
We sure hope so.
They better.
Because if they come off,
They
it's not.
better.
No, they do stay permanently. And actually, early on, every so often, one of the leaflets would pop out. Very, very rare. And this has been done many, many times now.
How many of these in 20 years?
So the first one that we did was in 2003. And actually, I was part of a team. Actually went to Venezuela because there's a very famous cardiologist down there who's very good at these techniques. And he had helped us develop it. So we went down there and did the first case that actually went very well. And that was 2003. We came back and started right away in the United States. And subsequently, we're getting close to now about 100,000 have been done.
Oh my God.
And it's in over 50 countries around the world. Now, that said, there was a long and very arduous process to get to the point where it has become accepted as a clinical standard. Because honestly, when you think about it, the surgeons had been fixing valves for a while. And this was kind of threatening to them, and understandably so, because they had built their lives on this big major procedure, which helped. And to have these young upstarts come in and propose this basically simple procedure that was kind of, I hate to say it, but kind of dumbing down what they did. There was a lot of resistance in the community. And it's only within the last few years that we've been able to get through that hurdle. The Europeans were far more advanced than us. They approved it for use back in 2008 in Germany and France and Holland and all these, Spain. And so they have a lot more experience, actually, a lot more doctors doing it. It wasn't approved in the United States, partially in 2013. And then actually just a few months ago did we finally get total broad approval.
No kidding.
So when you think about it, 20 years.
I can't wait to have one.
Not a chance. Not a chance, sweetheart.
Let's see.
Let's look at the animation. Let me take you through the animation.
Okay.
Can we play that? Is this going to show up here? Okay, well, there's the heart.
Look.
That was the heart, and it was leaking there. So there's this device here, and this is the platform that we have sitting on the patient, actually, this stand here, and then this below the stand, that is the part that goes in. So again, in the cath lab, that's the femoral vein. We introduce first a wire up, and then we have to poke from the right atrium, the right side of the heart, across the little septum into what's called the left atrium. That's the upper chamber on the left side. And there's the left atrium here. Here's the mitral valve down here. So this is our guiding catheter, which we steer. Now we introduce the clip through this guiding catheter. And again, we're watching with ultrasound, we're watching with the x-ray, and we maneuver it around above the valve here. So we're turning these knobs, moving it around. It's a little gymnastics. I tell you, the next generation kids are much better than we are at, because they play video games. I didn't play. And once we figure out where the leak is, we'll then open up the valve. So I was explaining here. So see, we'll open this valve like that. So there's the valve open. And we'll rotate it around. So basically, it's at right angles. There are the 2 leaflets, and we're looking down into the main pumping chamber, the ventricle. And that's where it leaks. So there's the 2 leaflets. And we introduce the clip down through, right? So that's our clothespin. And then we'll catch the leaflets on our way back, and we'll close it. So little grippers that hold it. And then we take our time. And we say, is it good? Is it not? If we don't like it, we can move it around. Move it to another location on the valve. Try again, till we're really comfortable that it have a lot of good tissue and that the leak has been stopped.
Oh, that's amazing.
See, there you go. So we're looking down. It actually makes what's called a dual orifice, a double opening valve, and stopping it where it leaks.
That is amazing.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You're on board? And if you like it, then you have this little maneuver you do that basically releases the clip, and that's what you got. So there you go. That's the mitral clip, and just like that.
I am so proud to know
So this
you.
is, that last picture was
I
the group.
am. I mean, you're the #1 person with this, because you thought about it.
Well,
how did that come to you?
So honestly, there's
know.
always a little bit of luck involved. But no, so I was working in an ecosystem of innovation at Stanford.
Yeah.
As I said, people were trying to come up with ways. I was working on one project, then I became enamored of the mitral valve, and I spent some time looking at that, and I looked at several different ways to repair that valve. And only after I heard about this simple technique did I then, as I said, the light bulb went off, the switch was flipped, and I thought, maybe we could do it with a catheter. And at that point, and this is where we really we surfed the wave of the IT world. And what I mean by that is, when I started this project was in the late 90s. Basically, Google had started the year before. A lot of these companies in the tech world had started, and there were resources available to do it. So I was able to generate interest in supporting this project and put together a team of engineers. And I worked with what's called a medical device incubator, so a group of folks who had experience before, because I didn't want to give up practicing medicine. I love practicing. I love to be able to see patients like you. You know, I love that side of I didn't want to give it up, but I wanted to be involved
of course.
with this.
I mean, this is absolutely, just think of all the people that have been saved because of this.
A few people out there.
Yeah, how many people?
Well, we're getting close to about 100,000. We've had a few famous people over the years have had it.
Tell.
Well, and we can say this because she actually early on said you could do this, because we're always a little sensitive.
Yeah.
But one of my favorites is Elizabeth Taylor. And one of the early users of this technology were down in Los Angeles at Cedars-Sinai. So there are a few big names, but Elizabeth was really one of the most special people. And this was early on in the development of the technology, and she had congestive heart failure, so she had a weak heart, and she had a leaky valve and had been in and out of the hospital multiple times. So she was fading a little bit, but spunky as ever, obviously, still. And so it was proposed to her to have this mitral clip. That was still in the investigational phase, and she bought in right away. The cute story, I have to share this with you, Suzanne, because it really sort of it really characterizes Elizabeth Taylor's spark, and she's such an unusual person, is when she was getting ready to have the procedure, she was sitting in the outside room on the gurney, on the bed, probably had all this jewelry on her, and this dear friend of mine was standing where they were talking about the procedure and going through it, and the nurse comes up and says, "I'm sorry, Miss Taylor, you need to take your jewelry off. You can't go into the cath lab with it. It's just, we don't do that." And without blinking an eye, without missing a step, she said, "I'm happy to do that because I'm getting a far more beautiful piece of jewelry today in my heart."
Oh,
it was
what
cute.
a lovely thing she said, and
Yes,
true.
and true, and my dad was a great Elizabeth Taylor fan, and I think that he didn't care that I had come up with this idea. What he really cared about was it helped Elizabeth Taylor.
And it probably gave her more years.
So she lived another 3 years after that, and she was really on death's door.
Yeah. Guess what? We are nearly out of time, and you have to make one promise to me, that you'll come back, because we were going to tell a couple of your really dramatic stories. Will you come back?
I would be honored to spend time with you. What a joy.
Thank you.
You've been doing this for so many years and had such good stories. I'd love to hear a lot of them. I did too much talking today. You're the one who should be talking to.
No. The interviewer should not talk. It's to talk to the interviewee.
Well, most importantly, I want to thank you and thank the community here, because we really couldn't have done this without the really supportive community that Mountain View has and all the resources. So it's really special to be here.
What does your family think about you?
What does my family think?
Your wife and your children. I mean, because
they
you're
think
so
I'm just
special.
a goofy guy who doesn't do the dishes enough and doesn't. No, I have wonderful children and a wonderful wife, and I feel very privileged. And in fact, at some point you should interview my wife on your show.
What does she do?
She is a very celebrated exercise physiologist who teaches at Stanford. So she's my real coach. She's the smart one in the family.
Oh, I would love to interview her. I hate exercise.
You'll have a great conversation with you, and she'll change your mind. I promise you. You'll come out of the interview wanting to exercise.
But I know you are so into exercise.
Well, I have to keep up with her.
Well, not only that, but you have to. What I have to do is, I shouldn't talk about myself, but I need to have more motivation to exercise.
Well, that's the story she tells me every day, and it works.
Well, I know.
And so I take that and I tell my patients the same stories that she tells me. So, and that I can tell you honestly, this is wonderful stuff, but there's nothing that beats what physical activity does for your wellness.
That's what everybody's saying now. So it's true. Are we done? No, 2 minutes. Okay, I have one very good question. 1 second.
We've got lots to talk about. I only have 2 minutes left.
Yeah.
I want to come back to the fact that, and I hope people in this community appreciate it, that the quality of care that we have in this community is not good. It's not great. It's exceptionally great. The quality of care that we have at El Camino Hospital. And why is that? Well, first of all, because it's such a wonderful place to live. Secondly, because there's so many wonderful people, so many smart people with so many resources, that really helps set a bar, a standard of quality that I'd like to be. We at El Camino Hospital, and that's one of my roles. I run the Heart and Vascular Institute at El Camino Hospital. And my main job there is to help make sure that the quality is off the charts. And it's an easy job because we have such good doctors, such good hospital administration, great nurses, great support staff.
I was in ICU 2 months ago, nearly died, and they saved me. So
there's a great example.
That was no.
And look
I
at
know.
you.
No, but I mean,
And you're spitting fire. Clearly,
I
it
hope
worked.
so.
Whatever they did worked.
I hope so.
Yeah.
But you promised to come back because we have so many other things to talk about. But I've been so fascinated with this mitral clip. And I think the audience, the way you explained it too, was very understandable. Anyway, thank you so much.
My pleasure,
Really.
my honor, and my privilege.
And of course, I always say this, our crew is the best. And we're all volunteers. And it just, I don't know what I would do without this show. I really don't. So anyway,
Well,
thank
honestly,
you.
when I walked in here, that was palpable. You have an amazing team here.
I know it.
And you do an amazing job.
Thank
so
you.
congratulations to all of you.
Thank you. And I thank my crew and I thank my audience for watching. And this is what I say. This is where my drama comes out. I can't wait to see you again. Bye-bye. I always say that.